How's it going, guys? This is the Core 3 from fightinggamesonline.info, and I'm back after a very long hiatus with a new first look. I apologize for such a long hiatus in terms of YouTube content, but we have one today because the fine folks over at Next Studios saw fit to give us some hands-on time with the special closed beta for the new fighting game project, Metal Rising. So as we always do with First Look, we're going to talk about the creators behind this game, take a look at its presentation, break down some game mechanics, and most importantly, talk about the online experience. So let's get to it. Now, not much is known about the developer of this game, and there's a pretty good reason for this. The game studio is located in Shenzhen, China for starters, and there wasn't much information available, which means I really had to put my journalist hat on for this one. I did find out that they have released 4 games, the first of which got released back in 2017, and from what I've gathered, they're just your ordinary game company with no ties to a particular genre. It's all about variety for them. I also learned from the community manager of this title that this is the first fighting game that the team has ever developed, which lends more credence to what the company is all about. Around about December of last year, gameplay for Metal Revolution started to surface on various Twitter feeds, and after watching a few videos, I was definitely interested and wanted to know more. Lucky for me, a social media account was created on Twitter, and I've been following the development of the game ever since, which led to me playing the beta. Now, I'm not going to get into too many details in terms of release plans, as I want to come back to that later. For now, I'll just say that they're planning to release this initially on PC via Steam, as they have done with their other titles in the past. So let's jump into the beta. Remember that this is just a testing phase and changes have already occurred, so just keep in mind that things can change at any time. Now, I have to say off the bat, the beta came fully loaded with features. Arcade, offline versus, and online modes were all available, but they certainly didn't stop there. A training mode, an introductory tutorial, and mission modes for each character were all included. Finally, there were 8 characters to choose from, so all in all, a pretty stellar offering for the initial beta. So let's talk about the presentation in Metal Revolution, which is really what got me sucked into the game from the beginning. As its title alludes to, Next Studios have chosen to go with the robotic aesthetic for their characters. At first glance, I was instantly reminded of Rising Thunder, a free-to-play title that unfortunately did not see its full completion, but is still available on PC for everyone to enjoy. Even with that comparison, I have to say that Metal Revolution certainly has a charm all its own. The detailed cloth textures are especially terrific to look at, but more importantly, the characters themselves are what really had my attention from the beginning. Simply put, most of them are based on some form of martial arts discipline. Now, I know that may sound kind of obvious given this is a fighting game, but fighting games in general these last few years have kind of done their best to stay away from the usual tropes, and while I understand the reasoning behind it, I honestly miss fighting game characters being true martial artists. Of course, many of the movesets in this game are over the top as they should be, but having that old element of the disciplined martial artist, and in some cases the wardrobe that goes with it, that's something that is never going to get old for me personally. What really surprises me about this title is how current gen the game feels, despite its pretty minimal requirements for hardware. Though its CPU requirements are at least asking that you have 4 cores with about 3.30 GHz of processing power, I'm actually running the game at a lower clock speed of 2.0 GHz on a GTX 760 GPU, and it's running pretty well on the highest settings. Well, that's enough talk about the design. Let's get into the real nuts and bolts of Metal Revolution and talk about the gameplay. Like many fighting games that have released this generation, Next Studio is also interested in making this game approachable in terms of execution. They've done this by lowering the basic attack buttons, leaving them to just basic light, heavy attack, and making special moves work similar to command normals, where it's just a direction and a button. The commands are somewhat universal for each character, varying slightly depending on who you use. They also have dedicated a button for jumping, one for dashing, and another for a more powerful move. Everything except for jumping has an additional command behind it, and I'll get into that just in a few. Even with them taking the approach to make execution easier, there is depth here, which you will come to realize the more you play. Now, in terms of the basic attack buttons, the light button has an automatic combo, which can create a knockdown. This automatic combo system works similar to Arc System Works method, as it can be cancelled into special moves and chained into the heavy attack at any time during the first 3 presses of the string. The heavy attack is basic, and while it can be cancelled in some cases, its application only seems useful at certain moments, which brings me to my real issue with this game. I've noticed certain characters don't have the best attack ranges. A lot of attacks are pretty much close range across the board, but heavies vary in terms of range, with some being better than others. This makes playing in neutral pretty jarring, and though many of the special moves can certainly work to accommodate your lack of normals, I just feel like the heavy attacks needed to have a better range for every character if they wanted to forego additional buttons. With that being said, I'm still in the initial stage of learning how to play the game, so feelings can certainly change in this regard. Now, the offensive depth of this game lies in the dash button, with a special command that allows you to cancel your attacks to extend the combo. Timing and range can certainly play a factor in successfully pulling off a more damaging combo, and while I don't exactly know how much discovery and expression this can potentially lead to, it can definitely keep you in the practice mode for a bit. This mechanic in particular requires meter, which leads us to a major part of this game in general. Meter management is of the greatest importance in this game, as it ties into movement, defense, and your most powerful attacks. Blocking takes meter, dodging takes meter. Lose all your meter and guess what? You can no longer block. This in itself is insane, but if I'm being honest, it puts you on notice and adds an unexpected excitement to the game. Now, there is a parrying mechanic that requires meter, but only if you guess wrong. If you guess right, it rewards you with meter and in some cases will allow you to follow up with an attack. In addition to this, you can block parry, which is also known as red parry, and it's a welcome aspect of defense as well, so parrying most definitely plays a very big role in mastering this game in my opinion. I really do want to talk more about the mechanics, but I think I've spent enough time chattering about the gameplay. So saving the best for last as usual, it's a must that I talk about the online experience. Next Studio is going with a rollback netcode, which they claim works a lot like GGPO. When first entering the game, they immediately had a regional option set up, and I definitely think this was a great idea, though I have no clue just how locked you are to your region in terms of matchmaking. One thing you will notice from the jump is the ping, which seems to be the signal from the game server. The ping was represented by my region, which on average was about 66 milliseconds on my fiber connection. My initial matches went extremely well with no clear signs of frame drops. Inputs felt pretty responsive and not so different to the offline experience. I believe later on in the beta, some updates added match ping information, though it didn't really seem to be a clear indication of the connection between me and my opponent. Rather, it seemed to be just the ping we had from the server. I found when the ping went above 100 milliseconds on the opponent's end, things got pretty catastrophic, and I witnessed some of the craziest rollbacks I have ever experienced in a very long time. This may be a syncing issue, as Street Fighter V seems to have a similar problem with their own netcode, which uses a similar instance of rollback. Given this is a beta, I'm pretty sure things can improve in that aspect, so we'll have to see moving forward. Now, there were only 2 online modes that were available in the game. I spent a great deal of time with quick matches, which are tied to a ranking system. So far, things seem to be working as they should, as I never once played another individual out of rank. Additionally, you can basically move freely within the game menu while waiting for a quick match, which allowed me to play in single player modes while waiting for a connection. There is a lobby mode available, which I believe only allows for 1 player at a time, but I had yet to try this feature at the time of recording this video. So that is pretty much it for the first look. Next Studios plans to release this game as an early access title, though how long this will be after the beta test ends on May 9th is still to be announced. We do know that they plan to put a $10 price tag on the basic offering, which includes the 8 characters playable in the beta, and that additional characters will be had through DLC or in-game currency. They also are considering a free-to-play version of the game as well. They do have plans for other platforms, mentioning the possible port of PS4 and iOS versions. The developers are also looking to make it cross-platform compatible, so it seems they really have high hopes getting this title to more devices. Ultimately, I think Metal Revolution is definitely designed for newcomers. I honestly don't see a huge amount of veteran fighting game players sticking with this game for too long, as it doesn't offer the challenge that other games do, but I gotta admit the meter mechanic may keep some engaged on a competitive level. The initial tutorial was definitely good about teaching you the game's mechanics, but really what I want to see is a mode that will help teach newcomers more fundamentals. I believe doing this may keep the online activity for this title pretty high. I'm definitely curious to see what they have in store for their next set of characters, as the ones they have now are certainly interesting in their own right. Given its initial price, the low barrier for entry, and the overall game design of this title, it certainly can gain a pretty good following on the level of Brawlhalla in terms of activity. To me, it really comes down to how hard Next Studio wants to push this game, as I'm sure it can do very well with the right amount of support. I don't quite know if the HGC will embrace it fully as a competitive title, but I'm very much sold on it doing pretty well in an already very populated arena full of fighting games releasing between now and next year. So that officially concludes this first look. Once again, my apologies for the lack of content, and I'm hoping that at some point I'll get some additional time to bring you more in the future.